Well, that's a well-trained crowd right there. Evening, folks. My name is Austin Knudsen. I am Montana's Attorney General. First of all, thank you all very much for turning out for this event tonight. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're about 5 minutes late. We had a lot of people showing up, and I want to give everyone time to get in, get signed in, get a chair. I think we all know what we're here for tonight. What my office kept hearing over and over is that a lot of people in this area, and specifically interested in the APR and what's going on with the Bureau of Land Management, really didn't feel like they'd been given the opportunity for public comment, and that their voice just wasn't being heard. That's what we're here to do tonight. So I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking about myself. We got a few of the legislators who'd like to say a few words. Just by way of background, folks, I'm from just down the road here at Culbertson. I grew up on the family farm and ranch in Roosevelt County, Bainville, Culbertson. Grew up my whole life doing that, riding horse, usually not for fun. So I'm kind of a neighbor here. I spent 15 years in private practice law, most of that time in civil practice. I went on to be the Roosevelt County attorney in Wolf Point. So again, I'm not from too far away. But this is a topic that, as I was out, whether I was in my previous life as a state legislator or as I was on the campaign trail for the last couple of years running for Attorney General, this is a topic we heard a lot about. It's a topic that I'm passionate about. It's a topic that, frankly, a few of my staff had came from Interior under the previous administration and bring some knowledge and expertise into this. So we've been watching this one very closely. So the idea here tonight, and again, I don't want to belabor this, I'm going to say this just as succinctly as I can. My office, the Montana Department of Justice, we are going to comment on behalf of myself and on behalf of the Montana Department of Justice to the Bureau of Land Management. Their comment period is open until 28th. They need to hear from more of us. So that's what I can do for myself. I cannot submit comments on behalf of you all. So the idea here tonight, what we've tried to do is come up with as many different ways for you folks to comment. We've got microphones here. If you want to come down and say a few words, we absolutely welcome that. Probably more importantly, because there's no good way for us to really film that and get that to BLM. You probably saw when you came in at the sign-up table, we had little note cards. That's probably the best way. Those are already addressed. All you have to do is fill them out with your comment to the BLM about this proposed rule change, put a stamp on it, and drop it in the mail. And the idea here is we want to absolutely flood BLM with actual local comment. Part of the reason we didn't want to do a bunch of virtual for this event, frankly, is we didn't want people who weren't from here to comment. I think BLM's got a lot of that. And that's good, that's legal, they can have their say, but you folks need to have your say too. You're the ones who live here and are dealing with this and have this in your backyard and have the knowledge. So we've got that, that's the best way. If you're willing, if you got something that you really want to say, you probably saw it clear in the back out in the lobby out here. I've got two of my staff from my comms department. They're here with a camera and a microphone. If you'd like to submit a recorded video comment, we've got that option too. We'd ask you to keep it kind of short, work with them. But if you're willing to do that, that's absolutely an option for you. Another way, just real simply, I can give you the website. You can go right straight to the BLM. I don't know if it's worth me to read this out to you right now. If you want to write it down, or if you just want to grab one of those cards. Probably the easiest way, just grab me or one of the staff afterwards or during, and we can give you that that website. But with that, some ground rules. Okay, we don't want to be here all night. I appreciate y'all being here. We want to be respectful of people's time. Absolutely, you are willing to, if you're welcome to come down, grab the microphone. A couple of things. Number one, we got to be civil. Okay? If you hear an opinion you don't necessarily agree with, that's fine. We ask you to be civil, and we're Eastern Montanans. We know how to do that. Number two, please be respectful with time. Okay? I've been around enough of these legislators right here. If I let them, they'll grab the microphone and talk for 20 minutes. Okay? We'll be here all night. So I'm gonna grab Dick's cane here. If I have to hook somebody, I'll do it. But please keep your comments to 2 or 3 minutes. I don't wanna have to get out the stopwatch and keep track, keep this moving, but if it starts getting abused, we'll do that. And we'll start cutting people off just because we really wanna keep this going. We wanna make sure we get enough people to get a chance to say their piece. I would just ask, like as in the legislature, if someone came up and already said what you were gonna say, maybe you don't need to come up and say it too. There's a lot of people here, and we wanna make sure everybody has a chance to get their point heard. But with that, I'm gonna get off the stage. I know we've got a couple of people that wanna say a few quick remarks. I'm gonna start with your local senator, Senator Mike Lang. He'd like to say a few words to you.
Thank you, Austin. Good evening and welcome to Phillips County. I'm very glad to have everybody here. I'm very happy that our Montana Attorney General has selected to pick up this cause and to talk about it. I'm Mike Lang. I do live here in Phillips County. I own and operated a company called Northern Ag Service for 30 years. Yes, agriculture was my customers. And they are so now, more of my customers now as I'm a senator for Senate District 17. I'm here tonight to support production agriculture. In April of 2018, I attended a scoping meeting here in Malta, Montana, sponsored by our local Bureau of Land Management. I learned the meaning of scoping. Scoping means you're in the crosshairs, and that's what we're at with this situation. At that meeting, I was told by a BLM manager that they did not have to follow the Taylor Grazing Act. I do not and did not agree with that statement, and we'll fight to make sure that we use that law. Government overreach is very complicated and unfair. Private allotments should be treated equal to nonprofit agencies or corporations. I do not feel that private allotments rights have been protected. I live to protect private property rights for all. Environmental assessments, in other words, the EEA that we're talking about, are a project of the future. While we evaluate the local production agricultural customs, social cultures, and economics. The EEA has problems with definitions, as we in Helena know, some of it called indigenous bison. This EEA forms a very biased opinion in relation to the grazing of bison. Presently, Montana trust lands and the Montana FWP grazing procedures use a proven 3-pasture rotation, which I support. Therefore, I would support alternative A. I respect that you all will comment by the 28th, as the Attorney General has mentioned to you, and thank you again for coming to Phillips County, and thank you for production agriculture in Montana.
Okay, next we'll have your local representative, Casey Knudsen. No, he's not related to me. It's spelled the same, he's not my little brother. Casey Knudsen.
I'm going to be really quick so we can actually get to work here. First off, I just want to say again, thanks everybody for coming to this event here. You know, a turnout like this is what it takes to actually change the course of government. So just really thank you all very much. I also want to thank the Attorney General and all of his staff for setting this event up. You know, getting a statewide office holder involved is a turning point for our situation up here. So I think we have some positive things going on right now. Of course, my name is Casey Knudsen. I'm a serving House of Representatives member for House District 33. I'm a farmer and rancher here in Malta. And again, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and let's get to work.
I'd also like to ask former Senator John Brendan. John's our former senator from right here in your district. He's also currently sits on the Montana Environmental Quality Council. He was the former chair of that. That's one of our standing standing legislative interim committees that actually has some authority to do stuff when the legislature's not in town. John knows a lot about this subject. He asked me to say a few words, and I'd be tickled if you would, please. Senator Brendan.
Thank you, Austin. Well, folks, I remember a few years ago, there were several thousand people over in the gym, and a lot of you were here. Well, here we go again. I get so sick and tired of people that coming from California and the left coasts telling us that from out of the country what the hell we're supposed to do. I believe you folks should tell us what to do. You make a living here, and we want you to stay here. You know, Dan Rather was here when we were having all that hullabaloo on free-roaming bison. And he said to me in Malta here, he said, John, how come you don't want to have free-roaming bison in this area? I said, I'll tell you why. I said, you live in New York City? Yes, I do. I said, how would you like free-roaming bison in Central Park? Well, no, that's my home. I said, this is our home. And we intend to keep it that way. And then we hear, you know, how livestock is bad. They pass gas, methane, it's terrible. And we should just all be vegetarians. But have you ever heard anything said about a buffalo not passing gas? I don't think you ever will either. So, and we listen to this fake news all the time, and these people want to kill the communities that we live in. And I farm in Scobie. I don't own a cow, but I'm a farmer, and I believe in farming and agriculture and ranchers and all the small communities that support our ag community. And I love Montana, and I want to keep Montana that way. And I'm sick and tired of these billionaires from Germany and Switzerland and the left coast and California telling us what to do. They want to come in here and they want to say, well, kiss my ring. You know what they can do? They can kiss something else. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions of North Central Reynolds stance? Not quite clear, John. Thank you very much. I don't know if any of the legislators would like to talk. Frankly, folks, we're already 15, 20 minutes in. It's Wednesday night. I think we just assumed let's get a microphone. Let's start getting some public comment. We'd love to have you folks come on up. I know, Mr. Taylor, you want to visit. Go up there and grab that microphone and have your say, sir, please.
Thank you guys for coming. I might stutter a little bit, but I should tell know what I'm talking about.
There you go. Get that mic right up there.
Does that help? Okay, it ain't gonna be dull. I worked 42 and a half years for the BLM and never encountered anything like I've seen in the last since the bison have been here. The only two allotments that the bison are authorized on is Weedreach, Box Elder, and Telegraph, no other allotment. So everything else in Phillips County is decision cattle, period. You cannot build these electric fences or you can't, without NEPA, or they're not authorized in the first place. So any electric fence that's been built is illegal, period. Did I make my point clear? So what I figure is, we better figure out how to find APR for building these fences and how to make them take that electric fence and stick it up to the zuni and put the boundaries back on the official allotment map. On the official allotment map, that boundary. If they don't, make sure they do. Thank you.
Further comment, folks, go ahead, come on up. We got a microphone on both sides here.
Well, my name is Matt Spencer. Haven't really amounted to much, but I have lived in South Phillips County for a bunch of years. If I can remember, I've told you exactly. But my story is, my granddad homesteaded before the turn of the century, probably 1896, 97. My dad homesteaded in 1922 when he was 21. And he told me that when he was about 14, 15 years old, he used to deliver tobacco and supplies to the sheep herders. My granddad had 5 or 6 bands of sheep. Thank you. You take directions, because I've been married a while.
Not to me.
So anyway, in his traveling when he was 14, 15 to these sheep herder shacks, my granddad had 5 or 6 bands of sheep, and so besides, but going by the Telegraph Springs, there were big trails coming into the springs, probably 3 or 4 feet deep. And he said that, that was basic erosion from livestock, possibly some Texas drives, but very likely buffalo. And the area around that, which is property that I own, has struggled to produce effective grass because of the club moss. So, that being said, I have some notes here, but I can't read, and so I won't get into that. But in the 70s, 60s, I think there were 17 allotments in South Phillips County Grazing District. And the BLM, Black Lives Matter, no, it's not black, it's a Bureau of Land Management. It might be changed to ball droppings, I don't know. But to go on in the 70s, I came back from service in the late 60s, and in the 70s they came out and said, the way you ranchers are doing it, it's all wrong. So they did a study with some reasonably intelligent people. He might have been part of it. But they were going to cut our grazing 10%. So in this process, the grazing district fought it a little bit. So they did a study and determined that if we would go into a rest rotation, let them manage our range, rest rotation, that we could continue with our allotment. And so they built fences and put us on 4 pasture rotation. So one pasture was rested every year. Now, all of a sudden, the BLM has reversed their direction. And I'm not sure if it's global warming that's caused it, or if it's money, or if it's a liberal stance that our country is in. But I believe we need to go back to what the BLM forced us to do in the 70s. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next speaker. Leslie, thanks. And just as a reminder, folks, when you come up, please give us your name and where you're from, just so we can kind of keep track of it. That's it. Please.
I'm Leslie Robinson. I'm the second vice president of the Montana Stock Growers Association. And I'd like to thank Attorney General Knudsen for coming to Phillips County and giving us the opportunity to speak. I'm going to be more specific on the proposal. Regarding alternative B, we feel the additional vetting and analysis should be done by the BLM. Our organizations have consistently provided comments regarding our concern with APR's proposals and our concern over the impacts of the rangeland health riparian areas, socioeconomic impacts to the livestock industry, and mostly the local agriculture, rural economies. Additionally, if alternative B is to be selected in the decision, we feel the BLM is deviating from standard range management practices, specifically to fences. A range management principle in general is if you increase fencing or cross fences, you increase carrying capacity. Because the animals will concentrate in their favorite, so a reverse should be true for the decrease or removal of fences. And you lose carrying capacity because animals will concentrate in their favorite and best areas. We also have additional concerns about the fencing modifications or improvements that have been completed. It seems as though the projects that are proposed in the EA, yet in reality the fences have already been modified, which Roy said, and prior to the EA being released. And to us, that does not follow the standard process. Lastly, I would like to highlight a concern that our organization has brought forth in previous comments regarding the legality of bison's grazing eligibility under the Taylor Grazing Act. This concern has not been addressed to date by the BLM, and we ask this to be addressed in the EA decision. We look forward to providing some more written comments and continuing to provide information as the BLM analysis in this proposal in more detail. And again, thank you for letting us come.
Thanks for being here. I didn't let anybody come. Next up, please, folks, we have another mic over here. Don't be shy on this side of the room. Don't let that model over here. Yep, you're on.
Are you sure? You're all gonna be nice to you, you're already calling, hogging the thing, you know. But thank you for coming and thank you for bringing this to the public forefront. And thank you all, this public, for showing up. This should speak volumes to the VLM, that they have not had this type of thing and that this many people feel that they need to speak up. And we appreciate that and appreciate all these people showing up. I would like to start by saying that I have several problems with the AA. And the first question is, while we were working on the resource management plan several years ago, one of the BLM guys, Stanley James, said that they would not be able to go ahead with the APR's plan and vision without an amendment added to the RMP. That has not happened. What has changed? Mark Albers was at those meetings and should be able to answer that question. Because I think I agreed with Stanley at the time, and I still think that should stand. I also have a problem with the proposal itself. First and foremost, it was not written by the BLM, it was written by APR. And with that, they have assumed some assumptions that do not pencil out. And from that, I've garnered that the amount of forage on the private land is way overestimated, and so that the results is that there's a larger number running on common with the BLM and the private, resulting in overgrazing. And with the removal of the interior fences, which is also part of the proposal, it will not be able to control the overgrazing on the BLM. I think that should be a big concern to the BLM, since protecting their land should be their primary objective. The EAA also does not have a preferred alternative. This is the first EAA I have seen that they do not state the preferred alternative, and I would like to know why. The APR also says that it has wildlife-friendly fences. Well, there's a new study out that they have chosen to ignore and not include. And within that, it says that study done recently, that they are stopping a lot of migration of the wildlife with their electric fences. And I think that study should be included and that information shared. With that, also, those same fences are deterring both hunters and recreationists. On most of the BLM fences, you have a gate within about a mile from one to the next gate. And there is one stretch of APRs that Roy drove just recently that was 17 miles long and there were 3 gates. That inhibits hunters from going from one piece of BLM land into the APR's BLM. And I think that recreationists and hunters should be apprised of that. And I also think that this conversion to a conservation herd is illegal in the Taylor Grazing Act. There are some special permits that allow bison, but these herds are for market and do contribute to the feeding of the people, so they may be legal, but they've never been challenged. I will submit more comments, like detailed comments later, but I would like to thank you for coming, and I hope that BLM pays attention to the fact that you have done this and that there's such a large turnout. Thank you.
Matt, can you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Vicki Olson, I'm a rancher from out south of Malta.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Riley Honeycutt, the executive staff for the Montana Association of State Grazing Districts, along with the Montana Public Lands Council. We will be submitting comments as well in written form, but wanted to highlight a few key areas that we think are important to highlight this evening. First of all, being two organizations that represent the majority or a large portion of individuals who graze on public lands, our members are very familiar with processes within the BLM and processes in which should be followed. We feel that this draft EA is not adequate. Additional vetting and analysis should be done by the BLM. The APR has made it a point to share their goals of the American Serengeti. This is easily found on their website and has been used in many marketing materials. The American Serengeti is not achievable just by 6 allotments that are in this EA. However, it will require a larger plan and greater footprint. Because this mission is so public and accessible, we feel that it plays a role in the decision of this EA. We believe the request should trigger an EIS and have further analysis of it. I want to highlight similar concerns that you've heard already. I'll skip over it, but we do have concerns additionally with the legality of the Taylor Grazing Act and ask for that to be addressed in the response from the BLM as well. It's been asked multiple times and we have not had a response yet to date. Lastly, we just want to highlight that there should be equality across all public permittees. It appears that there is preferential treatment happening with the BLM, and if alternative B is selected and decision is made without an EIS, we feel the BLM should retroactively go back and review any requests from cattle committees for grazing date changes, date changes, as well as fence removals or modifications. And so thank you for your time and look forward to hearing others' comments.
Right, yes, sir. We'll go right over here first.
I'll just get up there. My name is Dick Richmond, I'm a rancher from Valley County. I'm a small rancher with a registered Angus herd, and I'm also, my wife and I own a business, DB's Restaurant in Glasgow. And I think something that hasn't been talked about, I agree with all the stuff on ranch land and range land and all that. But I want to talk about the economical impact of these counties. Every time the government makes a move, it seems like it negatively impacts us. The best way you can look at it is when they put in CRP. I remember back when I was in high school, Opine, Montana had a football team. They had a marching band. Right now, they can't even put together a basketball team. It's killed these small communities. And I'm afraid the same thing's gonna happen when all the ranchers drive out here. And it's all buffalo, so that's my part of it. I just want to emphasize the economical part.
Thanks, sir. Let's go right back over here. Yes, sir.
Sure. My name is Mark Onavicki, I'm a county extension agent, and thank you for coming to Malta and listening to the citizens. I do think there are some things that the state attorney general's office can do. As been mentioned, the EA is supposed to evaluate a future impact. We could go on a little tour, but APR submitted to BLM all the fences that they've already changed, 81 miles of it. So the action's already taken place. So fundamentally, the EA is void. It doesn't serve its purpose. So the Attorney General Office should work with the Department of Natural Resources to perform a comprehensive environmental impact statement on the state sections. There are 8 of them which are gonna be lost to agricultural production if the BLM has their way. And I don't think the BLM has the state's interest in mind, and here's the reason why. Specifically for state permit 8124 in Box Elder, it's surrounded by BLM land. In 2017 and 2018, APR submitted actual use. It's 40% above the allotted actual use. So somebody in the state land should take a look at that actual use. All of the permits, 8124, 9361, 8160, 9650, and 8171 have already had electric fences put around them, either on all sides or multiple sides. Let's just put it that way. I think the Attorney General Office should work with the Department of Natural Resources to investigate if there was approval to modify the state fences, if they're a danger to recreationists. I can tell you the solar charger on those is as big as a pickup, but I bet you if you touch it, it'll knock you over. You should investigate if it's on the same property line, if it's been altered from the state property line. And if you find that the fence had no authorization to be changed and electricity added to it, the APR should either pay a penalty and replace the original fence. Any other state permittee that manipulated a fence in this fashion would have their grazing permit revoked. I also think the attorney. I also think the Attorney General Office should investigate if holding a state permit for conservation use is higher than use than livestock production or grazing. When you consider the staggering fact that due to the drought that's going on across the Midwest and on the West Coast, and the resulting cow slaughter has brought the U.S. cow herd to the same size it was in 1961, which is a 60-year low. So I think you should look into whether conservation is an appropriate holding of a permit. Thank you.
Yes, sir, right over here.
Hello, my name is John Soper from Moscow. I spent most of my life working on ranches down here, Valley County, Phillips County, Manhattan. Dick Clayton said, Oakland used to have a football team. I remember in Malta, I had two car dealerships, two implement dealers, two grocery stores. They keep this crap up, they don't need the other grocery store pretty quick. Last grade, I used to come up to a dance on weekends, every weekend. I've been up there for years. I got a really good friend in the audience, said he's got his guitar out in the car, Mr. Taylor, he was coming by you. I haven't seen him for years. I'd like to see something turn this around. I'd like to see road dealerships in Malta, implement dealerships. Let's see the guy can bring glass open back up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Attorney General, for holding this. My name is Carl Christians. I'm actually from East Helena. I'm Vice Chair of the Missouri River Conservation District Council, comprised of 15 conservation districts on Missouri. We, for at least 10 years, have been working with the BLM and APR on this bison issue, all to be, seems like, not hurt at all. We provided a lot of experience and knowledge and as much science as we can to them. In reviewing this EA, we agree with Leslie and Vicky on the wildlife migration. The fencing will disrupt the elk movement. We've seen that. They're wildlife friendly. It's not exactly wildlife friendly. Jeff Schaefer ranches there north of Den, and he watches these elk pass through the fence. Cows going over. Nothing could go under the tall wire. The calves are going through the center. There's a video of it. So their fence will put a stop to that. No wonder we have so many wrecked fences over on our place over on the west side. FWP references bison fence as a 7-foot fence, but APR's fence can hold the bison with a little hot wire. I'm not quite sure. Riparian areas and soil health. APR references a study called the Cole studies, bison versus cattle, yada yada, paid for by APR and WWF. Basically saying that bison won't impact the riparian area because they're always moving. I disagree with that. Ask Flying Bee Ranch, Ted Turner's place down there in Bozeman. came in and removed all the interior fences, only to have to put them back because its riparian areas are destroyed. All I have to do is look on Google Earth. Soil health. Look at Henry Mountain, or Antelope Island outside of Salt Lake City. You can use Google Earth to zoom in and see bison in a wallow the size of half the stage. You can actually see them. Anthrax is up here. Don't quote me on that. I recall years ago on a good wet year, anthrax, am I right? Maybe I'm speaking out the wrong anthrax. Sierra, am I right on that? Okay, that can get stirred up.
It shows up, yep.
Okay, all right. Henry Mountain, Dean Rogie in the back, and Dick Iverson and a couple others actually went to Henry's Mountain in Utah to view that and visit with Conservation District folks and ranchers on that bison deal. Their comment was the bison have destroyed the riparian areas. It's a small herd in a big area, different topography, and of course, it'll be just like APR. Their goal is at 300, this is a number of years ago, 375 bison, but they're actually at 471. Imagine that, imagine APR doing that. Economics, we all know what'll happen there. It'll remove ag, plain and simple. Habitat, it's not being protected. No management is not management. And so, with that, I'm close.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm John Fogger, I'm with the Valley County Commissioners, Commissioner Mary Armstrong and Paul Sweeten are here with me. And just mention a couple of things that kind of apply specifically to counties. There's no mention in the document about coordination with local plans. Valley County, like most other counties around, have ordinances or resolutions or policy that specifically oppose the APR. There's nothing in the document that does identify that. The whole document is written as if this is just this little thing we're changing from cows to bison, but it doesn't mention anything. I went through the whole 108 pages pretty close, and I didn't see anywhere where it said, we're gonna end up with 3 million acres and we're gonna have the grizzly and the wolf, run the thing. So, I think that's probably the two comments I got. We already submitted our letter. We'll get you a copy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Commissioner. Next speaker, right here.
Hello, my name is Noel Heeman. Been here, I was 6 weeks old, my folks moved to the ranch, and the ranch is still in the Heeman name. So we've been here in this country a long time. Tonight I'm going to take a little different approach. That's what everybody else has taken. I hope you bear with me. If you agree with me, fine. If you don't agree with me, that's everybody's opinion. Okay, we're going to start off with an incident that happened in South Plain County. The Fort Belknap has a whole herd of buffalo out there. And they kept kind of getting out and hundreds of people. Well, they was getting out, and this one rancher's, and he'd come into his haystacks, he called them Fort Belknap, and they said, yep, we'll be right over and get him. So they let that go, and they'd come over finally and get him. So then pretty soon, by gosh, they're back again. So the rancher calls them back and said, hey, come get your buffalo, they're back in my haystacks. And the Fort Belknap says, yep, we'll be right over and get them. Well, this went on about 3 times. And about the 4th time, they come over there, and then the guy calls them, and he said, your buffalo are back again, what's going on? Oh, we'll be right over and get them. So he called them the next day, they were still there. Yep, we'll be right over and get them. And 3rd day, he called them again. He said, yep, we'll be right over and get him. Well, the 4th day he went down there, and there's still nobody to get him. So he pulls out his big gun rifle and shoots them all dead. Every one of them, right there in the hay ground. Okay, boy, that really turned everybody on Fort Belknap was gonna throw him in jail for the rest of his life, and I don't know what all. And they got the county sheriff out there, everything, when it got all set, nobody got up for anything. Fort Belknap had been told a number of times, and they hadn't come there. And the killer to the story is, they did was leading the hay drill for 3 days before they finally did come to get him. So, you know, you have to take responsibility for what you have. And I don't care if it's livestock, buffalo, or whatever. Okay, now, we had another incident with a buffalo down south, and the Matoka Trench. There were all bulls down there that, they were on my son's leased property. And he called them and said, you know, we got a buffalo down here. Yep, we'll be right down and get it. Well, they come down there and the old bull just absolutely wouldn't move. So they called up us here, he talked to them one or the other. We gotta try different tactics, and we gotta get more people or something to get that buffalo moving. So it went on there for a little while, and finally the guys called up and said, you know, we tried everything we could do to get that buffalo out of there, and he will not move. So he went out on the back end of a bale picker wagon as a carcass, and he's just laying down there to prove that we got him. So I'm going to take my story a little further. BLM, the Prairie Foundation's been in there years ago, and they bought the Whitby place. And somehow or other, they greased somebody's hands good along the line because they got the GLM so they could run 12 months out of the year. Very good. Pretty soon, a few years later, they tried to get it so that they could put all of their buffalo on GLM for 12 months. And the ranchers could only go 7 or 8 months. So they got that done. Then pretty soon they was trying to get it so that get the rest of the herd so they could run on federal land for 8 months out of the year. And somehow or other, some of the ranchers or something got a hold of that information, as in the fellows all band together out there and made a Ranchers Stewardship Alliance to fight this deal. Well, they got that stopped. And so then the VFM comes along and says, you know, let's just try a few ranchers, allotments. So that's what they're doing now. They come back with 7 allotments. And I think they've got somewhere close to 40 allotments. So, you know what the deal is down the line, don't you? That they will keep working until they get all of their allotments. Okay. Now,
Sir, I hate to stop you, but I respect my elders and I've given you quite a bit more time. Can we wrap it up and get to the next speaker, please?
could I just take a few more minutes? This is a big part of the story I want to tell. Okay.
Leading up to the big medicine, okay.
Okay. I think this is a very, very important little deal myself. Now, the BLM, the Prairie Reserve is always going on about how they should, that they are such a good neighbor. Always want to be a good neighbor. Well, I have finally come up with the solution to that. The solution is that you call them up if there's a buffalo in your place, day one. You call them up day two, if the buffalo's still there. Call them up day three, if the buffalo's still there. And the day before, you don't call them or anything. You give them till midnight on the day of the 4th. You go back the next day, if the buffalo were still there, you have every right to shoot the buffalo. Now, here's the way they can be a good neighbor. They can turn around and say, hey, we will give you $5,000 if you don't shoot our buffalo. For each day he's on there. Now you can't tell me the rancher is stupid enough to shoot the buffalo when he can make $5,000 there on for every day that the buffalo still remains. Now, that would be a good deal to be a better neighbor. And by being a better neighbor, and if they don't get the buffalo out after, 96 hours, then they pay you the $5,000 for each buffalo. So, I think that's a good deal. I'm out of time, but I think that if we had some sort of deal like that, and if they didn't get them out, they come and they took them out one way or the other, whether they had to shoot them or what, they take them out, and then they would give you the check for $5,000 for each day you're in there. And there would be no buffalo shot, and there would be no deal against the neighbor. Everybody would be happy, and every yard would be happy. They wouldn't lose any buffalo. And I'll just about guarantee you 99% of the time that you'll never get a buffalo shot. At $5,000 is just like paying a premium.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, you pay that premium, but they never lose it because they never have to. Thank you.
This gentleman over here has been waiting. Let's grab him first, and we'll come to you. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, go ahead.
My name is Todd Devlin, Prairie County Commissioner, rancher, former NACO president, 2016 and 17. On behalf of NACO, NACO opposes any cross fences being taken out. As a rancher, I oppose it, and as a commissioner, I oppose it, and I had a big spiel on riparian, but everybody took it already, so thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Todd. Next one here, yes, ma'am, please.
My name is Perry Jacobs. I represent the Jacobs Ranch, which includes my husband Lee and his mother Dolores. The ranch has been in the family for 104 years and 4 generations. We kind of feel like APR has put a target on our back. Our family is specifically mentioned in the EA if you had an opportunity to read it. The reason we have a target on our back is we have the unfortunate pleasure of having an allotment in common that we share with APR. This allotment is mentioned in this EA, and what they would like to do in the end steals, makes them a thief for wanting to take 12 AUMs from us that belong to us, that BLM has not indicated that they're going to take away from us, which if they were to do, there is a process to do that, and we have not been informed of any process that is going to take place. We have been fighting this since the beginning. In 2018, when we had the scoping meetings, we at least got them to drop their thievery from 212 AUMs down to only 12. but still, they belong to the Jacobs family, not to APR. The other thing that APR is trying to do is basically cut off access from continuous access that we currently have to this East Dry Fork allotment. They're trying to cut that off. So that if we tried to move cattle where we wanted them to, we could either, one, end up driving them through their bison to get to what they want to give us on East Dry Fork. Two, having to trail around their bison to get to our allotment on East Dry Fork, which is going to be somewhere between 8 to 10 miles we have to trail our cattle. And if you're trailing cattle with young calves, that doesn't work very well. So maybe we have to hire semis to haul them over there. All wonderful things that we would just love to have put on our shoulders. We just can't thank them enough for putting a target on our back. And I present this to you today because we're the only people that can talk about this. But we are tired of this battle. We will continue to fight this battle. We did put our comments into BLM today, all 15 pages of them, which include many of the things that you've already heard today. But the biggest problem we have is that they're picking on us. Thank you.
Go right ahead, it's
Oh,
fine.
sorry, I thought you was here.
My name is Leah Letray, I'm from the Lewistown area, and I'm a rancher from Winterford originally. So my two comments, I guess, for the record, if the BLM will hear this, that is that
Get right up on that mic, people have a hard time hearing you.
Okay, so, federal land was originally set aside in 1934 to uphold the livestock industry. And the American Prairie Reserve's requests and running bison as wild as possible will never uphold the livestock industry on federal land. And just on that basis, their requests are not, they don't follow the law of federal land grazing and never will. So I think the discussion could end right there. It obviously hasn't. So, if you look at the EA in Phillips County, these 7 allotments that are in question with this current proposal, there have been a few others that mentioned the economic impacts. So there would be 1,273 cows, or based on the AUMs, if you break it down in a, say, a 5-month grazing period, there would be 1,273 head of cows displaced. And of all the ranchers sitting in here, you know that there are great expenses against each one of those cows. And if you remove those cows from the landscape, it will cost Main Street, Malta, and Phillips County, if it's $800 a head that a rancher spends on those cows every year, this community will lose just a little over $1 million a year, and that's not just seasonally for recreation, that's year-round. Ranchers don't stop spending money in the middle of winter, summer, haying, harvest. So that's just on this proposal. And then there's a part in this EA that has a cumulative effect. And it's section 3-3, it says that the potential exists for further interest from the APR to convert all of their leases to bison grazing. And that lists all of them in Phillips County, Choteau County, Fergus County, Valley, and Petroleum counties, which is the 2-pro. And if you add all of those together, I can't imagine that it's a finding of no significant impact to the communities, because their end game, just on the allotments that they have control of right now, would displace 6,378 head of cows. That's 31,893 AUMs. And that is a little over $5 million taken away from Main Street, any of these small towns. So if we want the car dealerships, we want the implement dealers, that's the economic impact that I see. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, honestly. And I love our small towns. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Tom McHugh. I'm from Central Montana, also the Phillips County Farm Bureau president. I'm gonna send in written comments on the EA, so I won't directly state these things right now, as most of it's been covered. But I would ask that, like with all these comment periods, that local citizens, the comments of local citizens is heard over the national comments and international. We'll be far outnumbered by even the international comments compared to our local comments here. So somehow, some way, I wish our local comments are heard or weighed heavier than the international or national comments. I too, like Senator Lang, is concerned about the definitions, how definitions have changed, how a definition doesn't mean anything anymore. Even the word, what's the word significant mean? It's a relative term, and I'm worried about those things in how the BLM addresses many of the terms. Also, one other thing on the, not directly related to the EA, but what is the mission of the APR? I would, if you have the time, and I have read several of them, but the APR annually fills out a 1099 form with the IRS that states their mission and goals. And you should watch and see how over the years, how their definitions of their mission constantly changes to meet their narrative. I ask you to look at what they have told the American public through the 1099 forms. And this is kind of maybe a little stretch, but if, just if, the BLM does allow wild indigenous bison, what obligation does the BLM put on the APR to have any fences at all, interior or exterior? If they're wildlife, why would you fence wildlife at all? I don't know, just thinking on the rocks a little bit, but it's a concern, especially if there's something that borders the CMR, or even conservation easements. They're wildlife habitat. Why would you keep wildlife off of wildlife habitat? Conserve the wildlife habitat. I probably should just leave it at that. But anyway, thank you, and thank you for all for voicing your concerns. And I think take to heart what Perry Jacobs said. She's one of us.
Thanks. Senator Gillespie.
I'll leave it on there. Yeah, Butch Gillespie from the Cutbank Shelby area, Senate District 9, and which kind of goes from the Canadian border down to the interstate going to Helena, so it does cover quite an area. So our hearts and feelings are with you. We have our grizzly bear problems amongst many others. You guys have the APR, but I swear we got to stick together on this thing. So I hope my district can always support your districts around here and your problems, and probably vice versa. I think together we might stand a chance. Split apart, we're probably doomed. So let's do it and get it done. Don't give up.
I forgot something.
Repeat contestant. Yes, sir.
I'm sure I'll lighten in this time. I acquired the Montefiore office for the actual use from 2005 to 2015. Well, they didn't have it. So they put it on one form from 2005 to 2015 with no ins and out dates. is data damage. And they're still doing the same thing, they're trespassing. I've been going through their forms, and they're way over. Well, they had a little brochure that I found some information from. It said they had 620 head of buffalo, and that they counted. And I had the tabulation sheets, and they come up with 3,400 AUMs. So, I did a little multiplication, and it took 620 head of buffalo times 12, come out 7,440 AUMs. And if you take the 3,400 AUMs, you have to take about 4,000 AUMs over. And that's what they were over. So the next spring, on the Holsey place, they moved 210 head to that area. Well, when they did the Flat Creek they put their base property under an exchange of use agreement. Well, during the RAC meeting, the question was asked from Troy Blunt to Tom Darrington, is there any buffalo on the allotment? And he said, no, it'd be illegal. Well, he didn't look up in the air, because I was flying over that building and over the buffalo. I took 1,150 pictures of the buffalo, illegal buffalo, being trespassed due to the exchange. But I'd like to have some hire people in the BLM check out the Malta field office, case files. They were all excellent when I left. Another thing I'd like to double check out is when Fritz Thorne, Amanda got fired, I'd like to know why, because they're the only highest working people in the world, and for some reason, they don't fire them in the Bureau, that'd be illegal. They said Fritz the Miles City, Thorne the buildings, and Amanda the buildings. But I'd like that to be checked out. Thank you.
I'm Jessie Dolmeyer. I am fifth generation agriculturalist in this county. My grandparents built Dorothy French and been ranching out here. Can you hear me now? Okay. Jessie Dolmeyer, fifth generation, Phillips County agriculture. My family ranches have been in this county for over 100 years. Excuse me. Grandma and Grandpa were just named the Conservationists of the Year, and Grandpa's been serving the Conservation Board in this county for 65 years, 64, 65. If you want to know more about that, it's on the front page of the Phillips County News today. So I would just offer that if there is an expert on conservation in this area, it's Bill French. And perhaps one would want to listen to what he has to say about this. Another thing I would point out is that the reason the pristine grassland, which is essentially what we're fighting over here, is in such pristine condition is because the people of this county have done such an excellent job for the past several hundred years taking care of it. I read a report. I read a report published by the World Wildlife Foundation, by the way, that was talking about how the northern Montana prairie and eastern grasslands, all the way over to the Dakotas, is one of only 3 still natural grasslands that is in the same condition that it was in prehistoric times. meaning that when Lewis and Clark walked through here, the ground looked exactly the same then as it does today. And that's not an accident. So being one of 3 grasslands still in existence in the world, I'm not talking about the United States, I'm talking about the world, it's a very, very high commodity. The World Wildlife Foundation puts as much emphasis on this as it does on the rainforest over in Africa. The reason that APR is here in the first place, like somebody said, just look at their mission statements. It's a land grab. They want to get control of those pristine grasslands. The grasslands wouldn't be in the condition they're in if it weren't for families like mine who have been here taking care of it. Economy, I just want to touch on quickly. I really appreciate everything that everybody local here has said about the impacts to the local economies, and I agree. Another thing to consider is APR is a nonprofit organization in Montana, is a property tax state. That means that they're not paying taxes in these counties. So who's paying for the school? Who's paying for the roads? My grandpa is. APR isn't. So that takes away huge portions of the tax bases in all of the local economies. And who's going to be able to foot that bill? It's, like everyone has said, going to cause a lot of death to our local rural communities. National, statewide, basically the same thing. It's going to cause a lot of problems with our statewide economies. And if you just look at the food source, I don't know if you guys realize that this part of Montana, northern Montana, raises the best beef in the entire world. When I was just in Georgia, I saw beef there that was from the GAP program that was raised right here in Phillips County, Montana. It's the best beef in the world. If you take away the farming and ranching in these areas, that takes away a large portion of the food supply. If you look at the Cattlemen's website from many years ago and look at all the studies, there is enough agriculture in this state to feed the entire world. And we're talking about starving people in Africa. So maybe we should take care of our agriculture families. Conservation, as I said, that's something we're really good at in Montana. And it's something that people other places are not good at. So as you said, the guy that was right before me, what we have to say about it should be more important than what people that don't know anything about it have to say about it. Because we're really good at it. Last point, buffalo versus cows. So right now in the world, sustainable food and ways of living is really important. In northern Montana, we raise the most sustainable food source in the world. This isn't an area that's well suited for farming. This is an area that's well suited and best suited for cattle. And if you want to talk about cattle versus buffalo, there's a reason we aren't all eating buffalo. And it is because that they are hard on the agriculture. They are hard on the ground. And they cause problems with the riparian areas. And there are many studies that back that up. Buffalo are also dangerous. So then we're going to consider making a very dangerous animal, which is essentially a dinosaur, into livestock, and we're going to set them free. Because just like the guy before me said, if they're moved from livestock to wildlife, you can't shoot them if they're on your land. There's no fence that's going to be applicable. Like, we don't fence deer in, and so then we have to take care of them like livestock. Well, then you got to consider the brucellosis risk. So that's going to destroy the agriculture economy in the entire state and the surrounding states. And lastly, on the APR's mission of preserving the DNA of the old buffalo from back in prehistoric times, I would just like to point out that that's been done. Their mission isn't relevant because it's already been done. The DNA pure herd of buffalo exists in Yellowstone and in South Dakota. What APR is doing is just capitalizing off of that with the big marketing propaganda. It's a land grab. And they're trying to take our pristine grassland. That's what this is about.
Next speaker, yes ma'am, go ahead.
I'm Glenda Gillette from Winnett, and there's keep talking about declassifying buffalo to make them wild. So does that take Fish and Game take over these wild buffalo? And then it puts in, do we get tags to shoot buffalo when they're on our property? Where does that leave it if we declassify them as domestic? Just my thought.
Further comment? Yes, sir.
Nathan Eschmaker, I'm a director at large on the Montana Grass Conservation Commission and have done policy research and served as a policy professional on natural resource issues, government relations and other issues, not only Montana, but multiple states across the West. Appreciate the comments and stories, different things, but I just want to give a brief on some law. We have 100+ years of unambiguous public land laws structured around the domestic livestock industry. It's pretty clear, and I'll just read through some things. So, consistent with Executive Order 6910 and the Tailored Grazing Act, the federal grazing regulations are to provide for the sustainability of the Western livestock industry. Allotment management plans need to be consistent with the definition in 43 U.S.C. 1702K, which states that allotment management plans apply to livestock operations on the public lands or on lands within national forests in 11 contiguous western states. Federal Land Management Policy Act definitions are clearly structured around the livestock industry, maintaining consistency and supplementing TGA reserved lands. The grazing regulations define livestock as cattle, sheep, horses, burros, and goats. Bison, indigenous livestock is not among them. There is only one provision in the grazing regulations that allows for privately owned indigenous animals under special grazing permits, 4136-4. And it's an exception to the rule. If it was consistent with the TGA and FLPNA and the Public Rangeland Improvement Act, it wouldn't be a special use permit. And you cannot take over Tailored Grazing Act districts or state grazing districts with special use permits for privately owned indigenous animals. Pretty clear, it's defined in the regulations themselves. The term livestock does not include indigenous animals nor bison. This definition is consistent with and pursuant to the TGA, Section 102 of FLPNA, and the Public Rangeland Improvement Act, which makes no mention of indigenous animals or bison. The Federal Land Policy Management Act defines 1, allotment management plan, 2, grazing permits and leases, and 3, principal and major uses, with special reference to livestock operations, grazing domestic livestock, and domestic livestock grazing. Furthermore, BLM's Handbook on Rangeland Health Standards, under definitions in defining allotment, permitted use, and range improvements, are also structured around the grazing of livestock, with all 3 definitions providing explicit reference to the definition of livestock at 43 CFR 4105. Horses, sheep, burros, goats, cattle. Pretty clear. The Federal Land Management Policy Act left fully intact the TGA reservations, TGA grazing provisions and preferences, and the chiefly valuable for grazing determination classification, which established grazing districts with geopolitical boundaries that remain to this day. The classification, boundaries, and mission, as defined and codified across the last century, is clear and unambiguous. TGA lands cannot be phased out of livestock grazing by retiring permits, reducing AUMs while forage is available, or substituting livestock grazing with indigenous animal grazing, with the exception of special grazing permits or leases authorized by 43 CFR 4136-4. These special permits should be limited to a small percentage of lands available for livestock grazing, consistent with the statutory preference extended to landowners engaged in the livestock and farming industry, providing for the stabilization of said industry and protection of the properties dependent on the public range. And just a couple more comments. Mike Lang mentioned BLM officials saying we're not governed by the TGA. The Federal Land Policy Management Act and its savings provisions, 43 U.S.C. 1701 C, states, all withdrawals, reservations, and classifications and designations in effect as of the date of this approval of this act shall remain in full force and effect until modified under the provisions of this act or other applicable law. Tailored Grazing Act districts have been withdrawn from settlement and entry, reserved for dedicated public purpose, stabilization of livestock industry, and protection of dependent commensurate properties, and classified as chiefly valuable for grazing and raising of forage crops, with statutory requirement for Secretary of Interior to adequately safeguard grazing privileges. And this citation I'm about to read is directly from the Solicitor of Interior in 2003. When enacting the Federal Land Management Policy Act, Congress did not repeal or modify the grazing provisions of the Tailored Grazing Act. Congress expressly protected the grazing permit system as contemplated by the TGA and expressly preserved the classifications of withdrawals that led to the creation of grazing districts. And then one final thing, and I'll close. I want to touch on Mr. John Falgren, County Commissioner, and other county commissioners that are in the room, and local government. First of all, the National Environmental Policy Act is a procedural document for the purposes of analyzing whether or not there are significant impacts on the human and natural environments. It is not a decision document. Whether there is a significant impact or not, the agency is required to comply with other laws and regulations pertinent to the decision. This is in the NEPA handbook that the BLM uses for implementing these processes. The very first thing in their decision record is to show compliance with major laws pertinent to the decision. And I just referenced a lot of them. And then from Strikers Bay Neighborhood Council versus Carlin, 1980, NEPA is essentially procedural. It does not demand that the agency make particular substantive decisions. So this leads into, just really quick on local government's place in the process, which has largely been sidelined for decades in relationship to federal decision-making on our public lands. For purposes of the federal policy rulemaking and NEPA processes, states, counties, and grazing district advisory boards are defined in the CEQ regulations as federal agencies. This in some respects places units of local government with jurisdiction relating to the decision at hand with equal footing, further establishing preference and standing to counties relating to federal natural resource decision-making, setting them apart from the general public, and more importantly, not-for-profit special interest groups. In fact, counties are the only authority with some level of jurisdiction and authority touching all the lands within their boundaries, with direct accountability to the local taxpaying electorate. This is representative of the separation of powers crucial to good Republican government, and emblematic of the intricate design of federalism, in which the national government exercises few limited powers, while the states enjoy many broad powers. Presidential Executive Order 13132 states that the national government should be deferential to the state when taking action that affects the policy-making discretion of states, and should act only with the greatest caution where state or local governments have identified uncertainties regarding the constitutional or statutory authority of the national government. Thank you, Knudsen.
My name is Deanna Robbins, and I ranch in northern Fergus County, right up into the Monument CMR, and I'm also a co-founder and director of United Property Owners Montana. And everybody's done a really good job of fleshing out this EA. One of the things that United Property Owners in Montana is most concerned about is the deficiency in the EA to look at the cumulative effect. And I just wanted to mention that real quick because UPON is what we call United Property Owners, and we sued FWP about 2 years ago over the statewide advisory management plan, and because there were problems with it. And we were successful in that lawsuit, but there were some unexpected bonuses that we got, which were some discovery documents from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And one of those discovery documents that we received was a 3-page proposal from APR, then Sean Garrity was the CEO. It was a 3-page proposal to the state under the Bullock administration, which thankfully is not there anymore, proposing that they give the state the bison if the state, valued at $2 million, if the state would promise to keep at least 10,000 of them wild and on the landscape for perpetuity. So what that is a very clear plan by APR of what their cumulative effect is. This is not about a grazing permit. And when we've listened to the BLM director, Malhoff, he keeps telling us that, this is just a grazing permit. They just have to waive this as a grazing permit. The cumulative effect is supposed to look at the whole thing. And they just laid out in a 3-page letter in 2017 what their end goal was. And it's not just about a grazing permit, it's about 10,000 wild, free-roaming bison on the landscape that nobody has any control, no accountability for. So that's a real concern. This EA gives a little nod to the cumulative effect and basically dismisses it and says that there are none. Well, I'm gonna say that from my perspective with the ranch boundary on 3 sides by the monument and the CMR, if there's 10,000 bison out there, it will have an effect on my egg production. So that needs addressed. It hasn't been, and that's one of our, just something that hasn't been mentioned here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for putting this on tonight, and thank our governor for noticing that this takes place on the eastern end of our state. I'm Ferris Wilkes from Central Montana and Fergus County. Running out on the Inbar Range there, and I've noticed that in Montana, many generations mean a lot. And I have a lot of generations that just wasn't in Montana. And, but I got here quick as I could. So I appreciate y'all letting us come here. This is a really great state, and all the towns, between all the big towns, are what we're talking about, the small towns. And it's been said also that if they take the fences out inside this thing, that the rules are in place where if they misuse the land, they'll go back and put those fences in again. I don't think anybody really believes that. At least I don't believe that. And this affects not only this state, but all the western states. If they can do it here, they can do it in many other places. And so y'all are kind of a test group to see what they can do, who can they push far enough and hard enough, and just take their land and do whatever they want to with it. And one of the things that I would point out to you, the government asked you, your ancestors, to come here and settle this land. Y'all came, you built churches, you built schools, dug irrigation ditches. You plowed the fields, planted things, grew livestock, raised families, and now they want to take it away from you. So it's up to you to make enough noise that they can't do that. One of the things that I also noticed is that according the hunting groups, trying to tell them they're gonna have a great hunting spot. So you need to talk to all your hunter friends and explain that this is a serious deal. You know, Montana has 30 million public acres that they can hunt on already. They don't need your spot here. And so I just encourage all of you to make as much noise as you can. And Austin's already said that, but write 2 or 3 letters to these people. Let them know how you feel, because this land is worth fighting for.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being here. Dana Darlington, south of Big Sandy, in the heart of the Missouri River Monument. This is probably my 4th trip to Malta over this bison issue. I wrote a letter a couple of years ago, try to just read a little bit out of that. I lost my place. Okay, in 2008, Bison Conservation, the Department of Interior came out with their Bison Conservation Initiative. Principle number 5 of that initiative states, the Department of the Interior will work with interested parties, including states, tribes, landowners, conservationists, to discuss advantages, and concerns associated with specific actions guided by Executive Order Number 13352, Facilitation of Cooperative Conservation. Furthermore, the introduction of the Bison Conservation Initiative states, one of the iconic symbols of American frontier expansion is the image of vast herds of North American bison grazing on the Western Plains. While the days of millions of free-roaming bison are gone, it may be possible to develop partnership arrangements that will permit bison herds to recreate their natural role in areas where biological, suitable, and socially acceptable. Clearly, there's an interest by the federal government, specifically the Department of the Interior, to reestablish bison herds on a large landscape. The question then becomes, what is socially acceptable? So I guess this would be why I brought this point up to you, Mr. Knudsen, is this may be something you could look into. Obviously, by the years and years of people coming together over this issue, and we have 4 or 5 counties that have written bison ordinances in the county, so it's pretty clear that it's not a socially acceptable thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Yes,
My name is Dora Holt. I'm 15 years old and I live on my grandparents' ranch, which is 50 miles out of Hinsdale. And our ranch is right by Pages, which is owned by the APR. And every now and then, we get one of their yearly heifers in with our herd. Then we have to get little devils out. Now, what are we supposed to do if bison get in with our herd? I don't know, and I do not want to find out.
might be a lesson here for all of us. That was pretty impactful. Well done, young lady. Yes, ma'am, please.
I'm Nancy Earl, and I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, so I've been crossing off through my comments. It's whittled down quite a bit. I just have a few additions. One is I hope that Mr. Wilkes will help us make all that noise that we all need to be saying, even though I know he's not here in our county. I'm really pleased to see so many people from all around Montana showing up for this, because I do think that that's the only way it's going to be a big enough impact to make a difference. It obviously was disappointing to all of us to think that they found with this EA that there was no significant impact, because anyone who works on the ground can see that that's completely absurd in all the ways that have already been mentioned. There were a couple of specific things I just wanted to elaborate just a bit on. I believe it was Nathan Deschemaker that was talking about the specific definitions. And in the EA on 1.6.6, it's talking about grazing district boundaries. The grazing of domestic indigenous bison is not defined by BLM statute. Livestock and kind of livestock are defined as species of domestic livestock, cattle, sheep, horses, burros, and goats. The Tailored Grazing Act does not provide a definition of a domestic indigenous bison, and this term is referenced several times in the EA. And on section 1.4, the statement, the proposal to graze domestic indigenous animals, they say in there, is consistent with the authorities in the Tailored Grazing Act. And then they are recognizing right in the document that this is not going to follow the Tailored Grazing Act, because there's a footnote at the bottom there. And it says, basically, that their interpretation is that the permission, shall we say, has already been given to the Secretary of Interior in regards to the Tailored Grazing Act. So I'm just saying, we need to acknowledge that they're saying that they feel like it's within their parameters for the Secretary of Interior to just kind of scoop all that in as part of the definition. And I just want to make everybody realize that they're acknowledging it, but yet we feel that it's an excessive overreach
of these authorities that they think have been given to them. I also had a lot of information in my comments about how the APR has not stuck to what they have been supposed to be doing out there by removing fences. A lot of the information that Ray Taylor in particular mentioned with removing fences and having many more animals out there than they're supposed to be allocated. And yet, they aren't following the rules, so it's a little disheartening to think that it's going to miraculously begin to happen. But anyway, this is another clear example of APR violating BLM's rules. Knowing these facts makes it seem unrealistic that APR will adhere to a deferred rotational system within the allotted number of AUMs with seasonal use, because they haven't been able to do it when they were using year-round when they weren't supposed to be. Without adhering to these rules, our rangeland suffers the consequences that APR has not been suffering. And APR has made it clear that they do not want to manage their bison as livestock, and actually cannot herd them throughout their range. As Peggy Bergsagle was visiting with me tonight, that they herd them with helicopters and things like that, and they're not very effective in getting them exactly where they want to be. If rotating these bison as necessary is not how they want to manage their bison, then their bison shouldn't be on federal land. So, yeah.
I'm Dean Rogie from Sand Springs. I figured I'm gonna drive over 200 miles, I better jump up here and say something. I know many of you here in this room. I want to thank the legislative support here and to Austin. And I also want to congratulate the Frenches. I actually had the honor to serve on Missouri River Council appeal. Congratulations. I'm going to talk about fence, but I'm going to talk about it in a new way. And I'm going to go back to our Lodgepole Complex fire that burned down 1,600 miles of fence. I think we ought to have a wildlife-friendly standard of fence across federal agencies and state agencies. It's already been accepted. FSA, NRCS, they already have it, the design. Dawn and Travis over here, they can tell you right now, they built so much fence up with the fire. It's 48 inches tall, forward wire, and I don't remember what the bottom wire is. 18 inches, I knew somebody would. So the standard is here,
experts in here.
I think that we need to make that request up here, we use that federal accepted wildlife friendly fence. It only makes sense, instead of accepting one of theirs designs, they're trying to get accepted. I'm gonna say what it's been said. I've traveled a lot, and you folks are a sincere, valued, a thing that is lost. And I cannot say enough about it. I'm proud to live in eastern Montana, because you're also damn good. You all came out and helped everybody after the Lodgepole Complex fire. And we just had a guy in Jordan moved in there from out of town. Nobody really knew him. The greatness of that town, the guy said, I've never had that much furniture. I said, I don't know where it all came from, but when I got home from work, I got no place to put all this stuff. That's the honor we have living here. And don't give up. I've been in many battles, and I've won one more than I've lost. And it's because of persistence. And I think you're better off in writing comments, writing them with somewhat of a question to it and a request rather than just public opinion. Then they have to answer it. That's just my thought. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Commissioner.
Thanks, Attorney General Knudsen, for coming to Malton and getting this gathering together. It's a big deal for Phillips County. I mean, the APR has been here 15 plus years, and I've been on it ever since day one fighting them and stuff. And these 70 EAs that they're proposing are just the sugarcoat of what's to come down the road, because 2 years from now, they'll have another 7 allotments to work on. So I guess I'd like to urge you all to take a comment letter that the Attorney General has offered there. Pick a subject, if it's a fence, the riparian areas. If you read this thing, I didn't read the whole thing like Commissioner Fulger did, but it was wrote with APR behind it all the way. You read the riparian area, the sugarcoat how bad cattle are for riparian areas and how good buffalo are. Well, I'm not too sure, but I think buffalo herds are a little smaller, a little sharper than a cow herd, and pounds per square inch probably gonna outgrade that. So I don't believe that's fair to, and for the BLM to allow a nonprofit to write their EA for them is not really right. They should pick the neutral, and I don't know who did this or what, but the study that was mentioned, that Cole study, that's all APR money behind that. So everything in there was just kind of sugar coated to make it look good and stuff. And so I urge you to get to comments. Go for alternative 1. And alternative 2 is just a foot in the door for the APR to come back and take more fences out of them allotments and the future allotments to enlarge in them and to combine them with the other allotments that they have. So I'd like to thank you all for coming and stuff, but whatever you do, make sure you put a comment in, whether it's 1 comment or 2, but pick up the fences. There's 80 miles of fence that was put in before they even started this situation, not on the boundary line. I think Roy Taylor flew the riparian areas out there in the last month, and they're pretty well trashed, right, Roy?
Right.
So anyway, thanks for coming, and thank you, Attorney General, for putting this in.
Happy to do it. Commissioner Butcher.
Ross Butcher, Commissioner from Fergus County, and like with Dean, I drove all the way here, I better say something. I think most of the points have been hit. I just want you to know that Fergus County's in this fight too. We understand as local government that we are a check on federal agencies, and we intend to stand up in the gap and make a difference. You've got a lot of good commissioners in this area, and we're going to continue the battle. You will have substantive comments from Fergus County coming. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks, sir. Further comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hi there, Courtney Kibblewhite. I live in Billings, Montana. Our family runs a small business, Northern Egg Network, and then my family ranches out in Sand Springs. Travis Brown's my brother. Just 2 things that I wanted to quick mention. One, we work across the entire state, of course, and one thing that we see when you get big companies like mining companies, for instance. We were over in Libby, Montana earlier this year, and looking at all of the work that they've had to do with the local community and changes in that community. I look at Siboney Stillwater Mine in Stillwater County, and they've put together a pretty interesting good neighbor agreement with the Northern Plains Resource Council and pulled together a lot of groups. And so I think that anybody analyzing this EA with 2 cents should note that if there's not cooperation with the local communities, you've heard the county commissioner speak, that's gotta be some major red flags. That we gotta be working together in order to have something that's gonna work. And if it's not, if it's just coming from one side, what is this? How is that gonna affect our state? And the other point that I wanna make is, who does the BLM work for? They work for us, because we pay the taxes, and they don't work for anybody paying taxes in Switzerland or elsewhere. And I just think that's something that's, as a business owner, I expect that the people that work for me are gonna do their best and their full analysis, and I expect that to be done on this as well.
Thank you, Gordon. Commissioner Hunt.
Good evening, I'm Miles Hyman from the Turner. I'm ranch and I'm a BLM committee as well as Blaine County Commissioner and a member of the Montana Natural Resources Coalition. These changes that they've proposed, they can and will have far-reaching effects, like most of us have realized. it's like, Mr. Wilks said, we're a testing ground. If they can succeed here, then they'll continue to push. The APR appears to be just another form of cancer that continues to grow. We've seen them start to pick up a few pieces in South Blaine County. There's a lot of BLM that connect these pieces of private, and you can just see if one thing tips, then the rest are gonna fall in place. And like was stated by Nate and some others, the whole idea of the Tailored Grazing Act was to sustain livestock production and to take these chiefly valuable for grazing lands and preserve them for grazing. And also to secure the national food supply, which is a very important thing. As we've seen, that a secure food supply is very important for for our country to continue to succeed. The Tailored Grazing Act also provides and encourages improvements on our land, whether it's our fences, our reservoirs, dams, pits, those kind of things. Anything that improves our ability to raise livestock. It doesn't encourage removing those improvements in any way, shape, or form. And in order for their aims to succeed at their stated goals, we have to be gone. And frankly, I really have a problem sitting down and being nice to people that want to see you and I and all of us that inhabit this particular part of Montana gone. We've been here a long time. We've managed our land the way that we should. And they come in here and tell us how we're gonna do it. I don't think so. And in regards to their issue about buffalo and riparian areas, when Ted Turner, Mr. Isaac himself, spoke at the Montana Stock Growers Association a number of years back, somebody asked him about the having bison roaming all over when he liked to fly fish. And he said, well, if the herd comes through when I'm fishing on the creek, I have to move a long ways further upstream. Anyway, I want to encourage all of you to do like I said and send in your comments, because I think it really does make a difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yes, sir.
My name is Leonard Swenson. We live west of Glasgow. My grandfather homesteaded in 2007. Later on, in the 30s, he passed away. My grandma sold the land at $3 an acre for the farmland, $2 for grazing. That went into the Tailored Grazing Act, and we're still grazing that land now. I live on the same ranch for the last 7 to 6 years. I'm director of the 2 different grazing districts, North Valley and Badlands. Going back 50 years ago, there was a ranch south of Glasgow that came up for sale by 2 brothers. They wanted to see it stay as a livestock operation. His price was right, but it was tough to cough up $1 million back then. 30 family ranches got together and all agreed to buy into this ranch. We still have those 30 members, family members running out there. I've been president of the Grazing Association, is what we called it, Whitmire Grazing Association, because it's Whitmire Brothers. It borders some land the APR just bought, not too far from Stonebird's place over there. It's a concern of ours. It borders Fort Peck Lake. There's almost 250,000 acres in this ranch. It's primarily BLM land. They made so many improvements since we bought it. BLM in Glasgow has been very helpful with water development. We've been monitoring the pastures, taking care of the riparian, and developing a lot of wells and tanks. Gus Hormay set up a rest rotation system, divided the ranch into 3 units. Each unit had 3 pastures. We worked with the BLM on scheduled moves, keep our AUMs correct. Also incorporate somehow the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. At that time was managed by BLM and called the Game Range. In 1976, it became a refuge. Whole different scenario. Instead of 7 acres to a copper month, they wanted 21 acres, but that's, they don't manage for grass, they manage for wildlife. We worked together with all of them. I guess, way back with APR, I went out with Sean Garrity, toured the ranch. They wanted to buy it from the Whitmire Grazing Association, and member said it's not for sale. Each month, I signed checks accumulated for 1 month from this ranch. We had a good ranch foreman manager. But the expenses in 1 month were kind of shocking when I write the checks out. But it's nothing compared to the 30 members total that they spend locally. So it has a direct impact on the economy. I guess that's about all I have. Just thought I'd share that a little bit. APR is a concern with bison next to us. It's also a concern on getting on the CMR. Years ago, they fenced the CMR away because we wanted to keep the cattle off the lake. But it's been, I can't, BLM out of Valley County has done a super job with working with us on all our grazing districts. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson.
I'm Keith Callan. I'm from Turner, Montana up here. I'm a 5th generation. Our ranch was started in 1891. And up until the 80s, it was 2 pastures. BLM come in and basically told my dad, you guys gotta change this. You're wrecking this. And it was. I mean, I can remember as a kid riding for miles on 4-wheeler on alkali and dirt. Since then, we have doubled our carrying capacity. We're up to 14 pastures at this point in time. The biggest patch alkali that I can find to even get onto, to mess with, or to show anyone is about half the size of this auditorium now. Because of that, we've also increased, which is what the APR keeps pushing to us, is about the wildlife. Deer and stuff, I can remember as a kid were scarce, but now we have numerous deer, antelope, birds, wildlife, all that. Tearing out their interior fences is going backwards in my book. Our ranch is living proof of that, and I don't know why. My question to the BLM is, you've got a ranch that's close to the area, why can we go backwards? Why are we going backwards and changing what we started? I mean, we're just gonna wreck what we already got. Everyone's already stated this, it's here, that we've got beautiful, pristine country. Why do we want to wreck it by destroying everything that we've already worked so hard to create over the generations? Thank you.
I have one more thing to say. And being a retired sheriff, I have the safety problem in mind. And I didn't know if Leonard was going to bring it up or not about Whitmire Grazing. But if they could succeed in ever getting the Whitmire Grazing Association to sell out, they would probably be within 5 miles flying air distance, as the crow flies, from my place, but 6 miles from Glasgow, Montana. And that, I don't know if we want buffalo roaming that close to the towns and down on that river bottom, maybe right in that housing areas and everything else. That's one of my big concerns.
Thank you, Sheriff. I don't see anybody else lined up, so there's somebody coming. Just really quick, folks, this is great. This is great for us to take back to my office to file for our comments. what's important is not just me commenting, y'all need to comment too. I mentioned before, if you've got a mind, if you want to talk some more, we've got a camera and a microphone back in the back of the entryway out here. My staff would love to get you on camera, have you film your comments, and don't forget about that. But if nothing else, please submit your written comment. Sierra, yes ma'am.
I'm Sierra Stoneberg Colt, and I'm from Valley County. I have a doctorate in botany. I spent 13 years in college studying ecology at the university level. Now, I understand that what is important here tonight are violations of federal law and of the provisions of the Taylor Grazing Act. I understand that we are here to discuss the fact that such extreme changes to the human and the natural environment, as the APR is suggesting, require an environmental impact statement and not just an environmental assessment. I understand the legal importance of allowing the APR to make changes to federal land without following the proper channels, and then to ask the BLM to bless those changes with an environmental assessment after the fact. I realize that by exceeding their allowed stocking rate and their permitted period of use, the APR is a trespass. And they should have been paying a fine commensurate with that trespass since it first began. I respect the legal ramifications of the BLM holding the APR to a different standard than any other BLM allotment holder has ever been held before. However, with my background, my concern for legal violations has always taken a back seat to my concern for the environment. Therefore, I brought with me two of my papers. One is a peer-reviewed scientific publication, one is from a popular press publication, and together they lay out my case that allowing the APR a free pass to disregard the demands of federal law isn't just a legal problem. Those laws are actually designed to protect our environment, and ignoring them harms it. Thank you all very much for your time.
Further comment, folks? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Greg Oxart, representing the South Phillips Grazing District, and I don't know how many of you know who did the EA on this. Do you know, Austin?
I don't know who authored it, if it came from inside BLM.
Do you know who paid for it?
I bet you're gonna tell me, I bet I can guess.
APR. And so if you found any flaws with it, it's no wonder. Roy has documented, he was an old BLMer, and he's done a terrific job of documenting all the problems and all the illegal things they've done. And as been working with our secretary, you don't know what a nightmare it's been trying to hold them accountable. We listen to them, and they get everything they want from the RBLM here. They have bent over backwards. I submit that they need to have an independent audit of everything that's went on since the APR came. Roy has documents. If you ever need anybody to go through them, Roy has the documents to back what we're saying up. Nobody will listen. You've heard that all night. Listen to deaf ears. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. I don't know if how many of you guys listen to Orban's 405? The other day, he had one that really tickled me. He said, "It's amazing how acute the hearing senses become with the smell of gunpowder in the air."
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Scott Castle from Glasgow, Montana. I ranch down there, and my family ranches around the Seco Country has for generations. I wanted to tell you a little story so you know a little more about the long game. You've heard some of it here. I was listening to Canadian radio, 650 and 90 CKCK Regina, and they had a member of Parliament on. This was this summer. And he was talking about the closing of the Coronach coal station. And what they were going to do, since climate change is such a problem, to mitigate the massive impacts on that population and their economic system up there. What they're gonna do is go forward, working with their American partners to make this part of the world a United Nations UNESCO National Heritage Site, International Heritage Site. That is the long game, and they're working with the Canadians. And this trial balloon, if it goes up and stays, that's gonna happen in a really rapid fashion. They've been waiting for this administration to come, and they're going for it. And that is the long game. And you have a railroad that's owned by a guy that's working with them. They're already trying to take Amtrak around the southern route. Farmers that you don't know already, your truckers 6 months of the year now, you'll be going all the way out over to Williston. The railroad will close. It is the only impediment to making a migrating buffalo population. I was really surprised we got the irrigation system fixed on the emergency basis this summer. And that's a problem for them too, because they dewater the valley, they depopulate all of it. But the long game is what's gonna get us. If we let this one go up, we're really, really in trouble. And that's my comments for. We're really pleased that the Attorney General's involved, because he has methods of discovery that he can probably investigate and find out under the Administrative Procedures Act what the real long game is. They're not telling us, but they've got their eyes on Whitmire. Everybody in Whitmire knows it. And then they're gonna keep going north, because it joins up with the Canadian side. Anyway, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Further comments, folks? Representative Rhonda Knudsen, this one is related to you.
Well, we just stole my thunder. I'm Representative Rhonda Knudsen, and I'm from the northeastern corner of the state, and right now the APR isn't all the way to the eastern border, but we know they're coming. And I'm here as one of the legislators in the front row, and I wanted to acknowledge everybody that was here, and I'd like them all to introduce themselves, because we came to listen. We didn't come to give a comment, we came to listen. And we've all heard a lot, and we thank you for putting your heart out there and for telling us what we needed to hear. And I want you to know that the legislature hears you too. But I would like to introduce, or have each of the other legislators that are here who did not stand up and say anything. I'd like them to introduce themselves, if you don't mind.
I'm Representative Bob Phelan, I'm from Dawson County, which is Glendive, and also represent Whipple County. And I came here to support you all and our Attorney General.
Representative Brandon Lear, I live in Savage, Montana. I'm a fourth generation farmer rancher out there, and we do not have these issues in our area yet. And I'm here in full support of you guys and what you're trying to do, and I'm glad to see that there's such a big turnout, and to thank our Attorney General.
I'm Jerry Schillinger. I'm proud to represent House District 37, which is Garfield, McComb, Prairie, Fallon, Carter, part of Powder River, part of Custer County. So it's a big, beautiful district just like this is. And I know that even though just part of my district borders this situation, that it affects all of us, it affects Montana. And that we're here to fight with you and really appreciate the turnout here tonight. Thanks so much for fighting Attorney General as well.
Folks, I would just like to give a plug and say this is actually pretty remarkable. I'm a former legislator, former Speaker of the House. You've got a lot of horsepower right here. You've got a lot of representation in the State House and the State Senate that took time out of their evenings on a Wednesday night to drive over here and listen to all of you. I can tell you right now, there's a lot of great up-and-comers here. There's some future leadership sitting right here in this front row, and they're here to listen to you all. So a lot of great Eastern Montana representation. Also, we've got a former state senator over here, except I think maybe ducked out. Senator Taylor Brown was here somewhere.
He was beside me, but he left.
He's back in business, but we'll get it. But, I mean, this is getting a lot of people's attention, folks. So, you're all being commended. Thank you, legislators, for all being here. Anybody else want to make a comment?
I'd like to make one more.
Be a good one to end on.
I'd like to have the Inspector General.
Get your mic, sir.
I'd like to have the Inspector General check out the Malta field office again, because he did a bad job the last time.
We seem to have reached the end here, folks. I'll really quickly tell you, this has been very informative for me and for my staff. This has been very informative for the legislators who showed up, and believe me, there are going to be more legislators to hear about this. I can also tell you that Governor Jim Forte and I have discussed this issue several times. I spoke to him on the drive over here today. He's watching this one very carefully. His office is submitting a comment as well. He and I are walking lockstep on this thing. So we've got the governor behind us as well. Folks, I'm an Eastern Montana ranch kid. I'm not big on speeches. I'm bigger on action. If there's illegal activity going on here and we can find out a way to get into it, the state of Montana will file a lawsuit here. That's really about the other two. That's really about the only area of my cover, folks. But if you've been following what we've been doing since I took office about 9 months ago, we've been pretty aggressive on things like this. I think there's blatant abuse here. I think the Taylor Grazing Act issue is a huge one. That's a flagrant violation of federal law, federal code, and federal rule. We can go down the list. We heard a whole bunch of great input tonight. This is extremely helpful. But again, I'm only one state official. They need to hear from all of us here in the area. They need to hear from Eastern Montana. We need to bombard the BLM with comments. It can make a difference. Right now, they're hearing from New York City. They're hearing from the APR board, who most of them live in California and maybe have summer homes somewhere in Western Montana. They need to hear from us locals. And by federal law, that's supposed to be given more weight and more deference. Now, whether or not that happens, again, we're going to be watching very carefully. They haven't actually issued a rule yet. We're going to have to wait and see what happens here after the 28th. But as I said, I'm more on action than I am talking. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens with this. But I've got an entire solicitor's bureau that's chomping at the bit to get let loose on this one. So with that, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. It's been a warm night. But, great turnout. Thanks, folks.